Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Rita Townsend, and I'm one of your hostesses tonight. I'll be co-hosting with Dr. Vig Leon, and I want to welcome you on board tonight. And I hope you'll walk away from our presentation tonight with a better understanding of your immune system and what you can do to really protect yourselves, and really kind of understand a little bit more about your own health and your own immunity. We've all been through a lot in 2020. We've heard a lot about immunity, but there are some very simple things that we're going to share tonight that we think that you'll be ready to go and ready to take advantage of. So Dr. Vig Leon and I became acquainted through a global health and wellness company that we're both affiliated with. And Dr. Vig Leon also serves, I'll give you a little bit more about her bio in a minute, but she serves on the science advisory board of our company. And so we've met a number of different times. And last year, pre-COVID, we were just chatting about what we could do to really get out there and share more about how people can really take control and have better quality of life. We talked about aging and nutrition. We talked about hormones. We talked about weight. We even did a COVID health presentation last year after COVID began, and just it was an amazing response. So we really just try to share some really helpful basic information that you can use and you can understand, and give you some tools to really take better control of your health. So what I'm going to share tonight with you is just a little bit more about your immune system and how it functions, what it is, and then Dr. Vig Leon is going to dig a little bit more into the health and maybe even some familiar things that you can recognize from all the discussion that we had in 2020. So let me start the slides. Hopefully everything's going to go just like we assume it will. All right, here we go. Are we on?
Yeah, I see it. Just put it in the present mode.
Okay. All right, we're good to go. All right, let's talk about immune health, how to be proactive instead of reactive. And what we're sharing with you tonight, we have to give a little disclaimer. This is for educational purposes only. The products that we're going to talk about are not intended to prevent, cure, or mitigate any disease. The science presented is on ingredients and on published scientific studies. And our product that we're going to mention tonight also is not intended to prevent, cure, or mitigate any diseases. So I'm going to start by just giving you a little overview of your immune system. Your immune system has three basic levels. And level one is what I'll tell you a little bit more about, is called the barrier, which we're going to talk about skin. Level two is called innate, which gets down into a little more of the cellular action and the chemicals that stop invaders. And level three is what we call the adaptive system. So we're going to dig into those. But your immune system is designed to protect you. It's designed to protect you from bacteria, from microbes, from vermin, viruses, toxins, bacteria, and viruses again. So I think we can all have a better understanding of the importance of the immune system based on what we've been through. So I'm going to start with a little diagram, and I don't want you to get hung up in a lot of terminology here. Dr. Vig Leon is going to do a great job of putting it all together. But we're going to start at looking at these three levels of our immune system. And they basically work like a three-legged stool. Each one of them is designed to maximize and effectively in a different way. As we look into these three levels, you can see that they each play a very specific role, starting with the barrier, which is pretty simple. And then we get into a little more deeper systems that are called innate and adaptive. So I don't want you to get hung up upon that, because you're going to see very clearly how these different systems function. Level 3 is a little bit more complicated and complex because that's really where the blood chemistry and the chemicals start reacting, and that begins to in the blood cells. So let's take a look first at the barrier system. The barrier system is really the first line of defense. It's designed so that when pathogens begin to get into your body, it's going to be your first line of defense. It's pretty simple. It's skin, it's the mucosous membranes, which Dr. Vig Leon is going to talk about in a little more detail. I think a lot of you will be able to relate to that. The stomach acid, sweat, tears, and even saliva, all of those are really a protective defense mechanism that is in your body to protect about the first level of entry in these pathogens. And it also ties in very closely to stomach acid and good gut bacteria, which we're not going to touch on tonight. We're just going to focus on these three systems of your immune system. Okay, so the second level and the third level are a little bit more complex. And they actually, as you can see from this chart, are a little bit of an overlap. And they're designed to destroy pathogens. The innate response system is a more rapid response, but non-specific. And it's supposed to be always effective. And the adaptive immune response, which is a slower response system, is actually during the initial infection with pathogens, but it's highly specific and it's more effective in attacking a wide variety of pathogens. Dr. Vig Leon is going to go into that a little bit more. But as we look at the innate immune response, it's very critical in controlling infections, whereas the barrier response that we mentioned earlier is more of a physical and a first line of defense against pathogens. The innate immune response is the first line of the physiological defense. So as you see, as we go through these barriers, we're getting to really a different level inside the body as to how they function. So the innate immune system usually begins with the physical barriers to prevent the pathogens and then destroy them after they enter and flush them out. The barrier defenses are the most basic. And then the innate and the adaptive start the next level of response. And there's something in here called the natural killer T cells. There again, Dr. Vig Leon is going to touch on that a little bit, but I don't want you to get too deep into exactly how the science of this works, because what we want you to walk away with tonight is an understanding that they work in three different levels, and you need to address them in three different ways. It'll all become very clear in just a few minutes. And I think some of the terms, as I mentioned earlier, will become more clear. You've probably heard some of these terms throughout this past year, and now you're going to understand really what all these scientists were talking about. So the adaptive immune response occurs after the exposure, and it occurs when the innate response system is insufficient. So it's important to know that the best way to boost your immunity is to address each level in a consistent way. And what we don't want, and as we've learned from this past year, we don't want to be reactive, because sometimes it's just not enough to be reactive. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Vig Leon and let her dig a little bit more into the science. It's just a privilege to work with her. She's a board certified physician in internal medicine. She's board certified in anti-aging regenerative medicine by the American Academy of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine. She's practiced over 30 years in clinical medicine, integrated her internal medicine practice is in Gulf Breeze, Florida. So she's a Florida neighbor. And she also serves on the board, the science advisory board of a global health and wellness company. What she doesn't share on this little bio is that she loves to research. She researches everything. She's highly published. She spends a lot of time really staying up on the cutting edge of everything. So it's a real privilege to let her share with us tonight. Okay.
Thanks, Rita. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So she was talking about this last year, we've certainly learned a great deal about what we can do for our immune system. So this company has put together something, combination of ingredients to help us enhance that both innate and adaptive response to triggers in the environment. And so I'm briefly going to go through some of these vitamins because I know that you've heard about them ad nauseum probably. But to me, vitamin D is probably the most important vitamin that you can add to your regimen. There are so many things that vitamin D does, and I'm just highlighting a few of them. But it's important in that barrier function to keep those tight junctions in our gut, in our brain, respiratory system, urinary tract, keep those cells to get glued together to keep the bad things out. It also functions somewhat as an antibiotic in our body because it stimulates these antimicrobial peptides that then produce hydrogen peroxide, and that's how our white cells kill things. They throw hydrogen peroxide at it, just like we would on the surface, cleaning a counter or a wound. And then it has direct effects on the T and B cells, which you saw in her diagrams. And one of the things that was really important this last year is it helps keep the immune system in balance. So you don't overdo it and go into that cytokine storm. And there's multiple ways. There is so much on vitamin D and it gets so complicated. But it also helps that balance so that you don't get into autoimmune problems, which is where the immune system turns on itself and you start destroying yourself. You want it to destroy things that don't belong to you, but not things that belong to you. And I put this little bit at the end. It also binds to that ACE receptor that we saw is where the virus that we had this last year attaches to. So that's vitamin D. And I'm not going to go into doses here. We can talk about that a little bit more in the discussion.
I can't hear you.
I don't know how I muted myself, but anyway, we're back.
Okay, you're good.
Vitamin C, very potent antioxidant functions, probably the most potent, maybe vitamin E as an antioxidant. It's also supporting that barrier function, and it enhances the white blood cells' ability to kill. And then it has gene regulating effects, helping those T and B cells work. It helps clean up trash, which is really important. And we've talked about that in some of our other videos. If you want to look back on YouTube, autophagy, getting rid of dead cells, waste. That's very important in keeping the system strong. Now, one thing that is not commonly known about vitamin C is when you get sick, the body sucks that up so fast that you say if you're, taking 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams a day, if you get sick, you've got to double or triple that because your body is using it up. And so a lot of people think, well, if they take 4,000 a day, they're good. But if you're taking 4,000 a day, when you get sick, you're going to have to take more. So you don't really have to take as a preventive that big of doses. And one of the things that I do in my clinic is give intravenous vitamin C in large doses. That's a very, very different thing than what you're doing when you're taking vitamin C by mouth as a preventive, because it becomes more of a killing agent versus a stimulating your immune system agent. Okay, next slide. And then zinc, we've heard a lot about that this year. And we've known for a long time that's very important in healing and helping shorten the duration of colds and common viruses. But one thing we found this year, particularly with the coronavirus, the zinc was super important in helping us with our defense against that. Now, the important thing is zinc needs to be in the cell to work. So you need to make sure that you're taking a good form of it, and things like quercetin will help get it in the cell. It also helps with barrier functions, gene regulation, and again, that's affecting how the T and B cells operate. And it's important on how the white cells work as well. Okay, next slide. And then elderberry has been, it's been used way years and years and years. And it's commonly used for colds and flus and viruses. But there's actually some data on the sambucol that there's data that it's effective against 10 strains of influenza. It increases those cytokines that we've heard about this year. I think it's so funny, Rita, because these were all things that, you know, we'd hear at lectures, and the common person has never heard of TNF alpha, interleukin 6. Now everybody knows about cytokines, but it does help increase that. And so it's a very commonly used product, and you'll see it all over the shelves, but that's also in this product. Then it also functions as an antioxidant. Now we're going to get into the real fun. This is what excites me the most. Epicor. That is the essence, really, of this product that we're talking about that gets me so excited. Okay, so the history of Epicor, it was a plant where people were making animal feed, and they were adding this fermented yeast product. It comes from Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's actually called baker's yeast as opposed to brewer's yeast. And it was being used as a food additive because the company owner felt like it was making his animals healthier, that was making the food that they gave him healthier. But what they noticed after a period of time was people weren't taking sick leave. They were never sick. And that launched human studies to find out what exactly is this product doing? Why is it improving the immune system? Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so what, for me, when my son was, I think he was somewhere between 6 months and a year, maybe it was a year old, and it was time to put him in daycare. That study came out about the plant and what Epicor did. And they'd also done a study on 25-year-olds checking something they call your secretory IgA. And that lines all of your mucous membranes. And they found that when you took this product, that levels of IgA went up. And I'm sitting here thinking, having already raised 3 kids, and when they hit daycare, they're like snotty nose, they're always coming down with something, and you're always fighting off something. And I thought, you know, I'm going to try this stuff. I said, this may really help me not get sick anymore. Well, I also have a problem where I've had 2 nasal surgeries. I just have a defective nose. It's obstructed. I got hit with a football once when I was younger, and maybe that's what caused it. I don't know, but I've had 2 septum surgeries, and I'm always congested. And when ENT doctors look at my nose, they're just like, oh my gosh, you know, one of them wants to operate on me now. And I'm like, no, you're not touching my nose. So I'm chronically congested. And I started this, like I said, to keep from getting sick. But after I had been on it, say, I don't know, 5 to 7 days, I was breathing clearly. My congestion had gotten better. And I'll fast forward a little bit. When I started dating my husband, I heard him wheezing all the time, and he'd had problems with wheezing, shortness of breath since childhood, and was on a lot of medication. And I said, listen, you need to start this Epicor. And he did. And I'm happy to say that he doesn't wheeze anymore, and he breathes better, and he's a lot healthier. And he takes this religiously. He will not be a day without it because he realizes how much it's changed his life. I, on the other hand, tend to get slack. And if it's not the season where pollen is bad, I tend to breathe better anyway, and I'll forget to take it. About 5 days after it, my congestion is back, and I'm like, oh, geez, you forgot to do it. So I personally am so fired up about this product. But when LifeVantage decided to make this immune enhancer and put that in there, I went back to PubMed to see what was new and was just flabbergasted at all the cool stuff. So I'm really excited about this. I think this is a wonderful thing that you can add to your daily routine to enhance your immune system. It also has antioxidant properties, which I had no idea. And it functions as a prebiotic, which I had no idea either. Okay, you can go to the next slide. And it's called a yeast fermentate. And that gets confusing because people think you're eating yeast. You're really not eating your yeast. It's a fermented product that's coming from yeast, and there's no yeast in it. Because people say, oh, I can't take yeast, or I'm sensitive to yeast. I can tell you I've used this, well, for 15 years in my clinic, and I help people that have yeast overgrowth get rid of it by using this because it helps enhance their immune system. And so what it's doing partly is it's having a favorable effect on the white cells, just like those other vitamins that we talked about earlier. So it's helping them. Those are a 3D picture of white cells. I think it's cute. All right, go on to the next one. So it's activating the white cells to fight infection. And there's these pro-inflammatory beta glucans, and we've talked about that in a probiotic product in a previous video. Beta glucans are super important on activating those white cells that are in the intestinal lining so that they can fight off invaders that are coming through. So that's a good thing. You want to activate those. But it also has anti-inflammatory effects to keep the immune system in balance. And several studies have showed it lowering this gamma interferon, which is an inflammatory marker. So it just kind of keeps that immune system in balance again, like you want it to be. Okay, so the next one. All right, it also increases your natural killer cell activity. Now, these are wonderful cells. They help fight cancer. They help knock out viruses, bacteria, and fungus. And so you want a certain level of natural killer activity, and it helps enhance that. So basically, your innate system is sitting there waiting to see if anything attacks it. You're improving that innate system. So it's sitting there and much healthier and ready to deal with something if it comes along. And I told you before about increasing that mucosal IgA. That literally lines your nose, your esophagus, your stomach, your intestine. And that is your first line of immune defense of the adaptive system, is having that IgA attack. And so you're increasing your levels. And then, of course, the antioxidant effects. Okay, so when they looked at, they've done several studies here, but they looked at the incidence of cold and flu, and it actually reduced the incidence of cold and flu during 12-week study at 500 milligrams a day, and these were non-flu vaccinated individuals. In another study, they looked at flu vaccinated individuals, and it also reduced the incidence and duration of the cold and flu. So I thought that was very impressive, and I've got the references there if you want to check them out. Okay, next slide. There's actually 14 studies on PubMed about this. Now, this was a randomized placebo-controlled trial, 96 people, so that's a pretty good size in a study of a nutrient, 12 weeks again. This was during pollen season where there was a very, very high count. They gave 500 a day or placebo, and they found that it reduced the allergy symptoms, nasal congestion, and the need for rescue medications. So when I saw that, I said, well, no wonder. And that's predominantly, honestly, what I have used this product for in my clinic was nasal congestion and problems with pollen or breathing issues related to those. I actually, one time I told somebody about this, and she was on allergy shots and a bunch of stuff. And I said, hey, why don't you try this and see what it does? She came in with a bag of supplements and medications, a huge bag, and she goes, my family thanks you. My husband thanks you. My coworkers thank you. She said, I am so much better, and I don't need all this stuff anymore. So I love this product. You can tell from my enthusiasm. This stuff is great. Okay, next one. Okay, so this was something I didn't know, because literally I've been on this so long, I don't remember if I felt anything in my GI tract when I started. But the prebiotic means that it's actually helping the good bacteria get established. It's like the sunlight, the fertilizer, the soil that helps the microbiome, and it has some type of effect. Don't know exactly how it does, but it's changing the structure, it's reducing pathogens, and it actually increased your good bacteria, your lactobacillus and your bifidobacterium. And I think next slide, there's something else it says about bacteria. Yeah, these ones at the bottom, the Bacteroides and the Akkermansia. Akkermansia is super important in sugar balance. And a lot of times people that have problems with sugar regulation are low in that, and it actually helps increase that as well. That people reported improved bowel movement frequency, improved symptoms of bloating and gas, their stool consistency was best, and they had a perception of less stress, which I thought was really interesting. All right, so let's the next one. This was also interesting, that it helped prevent heat trauma on the intestine. That LPS release, that's lipopolysaccharide. When you go into septic shock or you get a bad leaky gut and say E. coli is released into your bloodstream, then you release this And so that's a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing if you're fighting an infection, but it's a bad thing because it causes septic shock. And they found that this helped stop that when it was caused by heat. And heat causes the red blood cells to die and get deformed, and it helped prevent that. And it helped prevent a decrease in white blood cells from heat. And living in Florida, I'll tell you, it gets pretty doggone hot here. So that's a really cool thing too, that I had no idea. All right, so let's move on. I think that may be my last slide. Okay, so what I like even more, I've been taking capsules. Well, if you're like me, you're a biohacker, you tend to take a lot of stuff and handfuls of pills, and I get sick of it. And like I said, I will forget to take my Epicor regularly because it's just another pill, and LifeVantage had the foresight to put this in a drink. And I love water if I'm thirsty or if I'm working out, but just as a beverage during the day, it's boring. I want something with flavor. So this is a phenomenal idea. It's acai flavored, and you can take it, put it in your water bottle and drink it every day. And so I know I'm going to be so much better about taking this because I don't have to take another pill. And let's move to the next one. I think this is the last slide. So basically what this is LifeVantage came out with, they call it 5 to Thrive. We went through the 5 ingredients. It's just called a daily wellness with all these wonderful things in it. And it's just a beverage that you can do once a day. And you've seen all the wonderful things it'll do for your immune system. And it's just one more